Yeah, so I remember this day very clearly. I was in a library trying to find something to read, and nothing was really grabbing me. I felt like every book I picked up had the same blurb. It was always so and so was perfectly normal, and then something horrific happened. Or sometimes so and so seemed perfectly normal, but something horrific had happened in the past.
Mhm.
And I said to myself very mulishly, well, if this is what I have to write to be published, I'm going to come up with the most horrific thing I can, and I'm going to write a story about it.
Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I geek out about the stories we are passionate about in all different genres, styles, and formats. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and I started this podcast in the summer of 2020 at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. As I watched the reaction of my friends, family, and social media circle, I noticed that many people turned to stories for comfort and help in making sense of the craziness going on around them. My goal was to do the same for my listeners, but as I chatted with my guests throughout the first year, I discovered that their personal stories were the most fascinating thing about each episode. Neil Gaiman says, fairy tales are more than true not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. I now know that sharing our experiences with others helps us defeat our own dragons. It is our stories that connect us to one another. Let's see what wisdom today's guest has to share with us. Hello, Alanna. This is episode 71, and I'm talking to Alanna Irving. Alanna, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So you and I met, I think, through WordPress. Is that right?
I discovered you through an interview you did with a fellow author of mine.
Oh.
Terry
Brown.
Terry Brown. I can't believe I forgot her surname. Yes. So we are both Atmosphere published authors. That's how I discovered you.
Oh, that's cool. Yes. Oh, I love her book. And thank you for letting me read your book too. That was really great. So your book is Abolish the Rose. And can you tell about the title, how you got the title of that?
Yeah. So the title comes from a quote that I found by accident that goes, the question of common sense is always, what is it good for? A question that would abolish the rose and be answered triumphantly by the cabbage. I have no idea what the original context of that quote was, but it struck me, it got me thinking. And I think in general, we tend to see what we want to see in things like this. And for me, it had a particular meaning that I felt applied quite well to this story and this character.
Mm-hmm. So tell a little bit about your book and Camille, is that her name? Camille?
Mm-hmm.
Tell about her.
Yeah. So Camille is recently retired and struggling to fill her time and struggling to come to terms with some fairly traumatic events that happened in her past that she's always been a bit resentful of. And the way that I see her story relating to this quote is that, I mean, if the quote says that the only good things, if we only look at utility, if we only look at what things can do for us, then we would only value the cabbage, not the rose. And maybe Camille's life didn't go the way she wanted it to. She didn't achieve what she wanted it to, but that doesn't mean that, you know, a rose still has its own value. Her life still has its own beauty and its own value, even if, you know, she hasn't changed the world or whatever she wanted to achieve with it. So I think it's about a different way of looking at things and how we assign value and how we assign lack of value.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's, I always thought that was interesting that Camille resented her life and didn't think that she had accomplished anything, partly because she had to work at a job that she hated. But the care that she took of her father and her brother was to me, that's the rose right there, because she did accomplish something. She just didn't think she did.
Yeah, and I think it's not that she doesn't see it as an accomplishment. It's just that she didn't choose it, and she resents it being imposed upon her. And instead of being able to say, this happened and this is where I am now, I'm going to make the best of it and I'm going to see the value in what I am doing, she kind of stays stuck in this, I didn't choose this and therefore I'm not going to like it sort of mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I see that. Yeah. But it's neat that she finds painting.
Yeah.
That was a little hopeful at the end.
I like to leave it open. It's not a happy ending, but it's not a totally hopeless ending either. And maybe she's made some progress. I think she still has some way to go, but there's hope there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I thought maybe it might be open for a sequel. I don't know what you're thinking, but it was like, oh, yeah, because if she continues to paint, maybe something else will happen in her life. So,
I mean, never say never. I mean, I do wonder what happened to Michael. Maybe we need to find out what happened to him. Maybe we need to see where Camille goes in the future.
right. Yeah.
At least I think it would be good for her to see that life doesn't end. She's 62. She's got years ahead of her. She can still do things.
Right. Yes. Right. And her father, was he still alive at the end?
Who knows?
Because it doesn't really say.
I do have a bit of a cruel habit of leaving things unresolved. I think it's more fun that way. You can decide, maybe he is, maybe he isn't.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, and the whole story about her mother and brother, that was very sad. I don't want to give too much away, but it was so sad. But yet, on the other hand, she stepped up. She did what she needed to do, what needed to be done. Yeah.
I mean, I do think she's a flawed character, or at least she's unable to move past. I mean, I hear a lot these days about post-traumatic growth instead of post-traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. And she's not really got that far yet. But at the same time, she did step up. She was fantastic. She was there for her family. She did the right thing. Never even crossed her mind not to, Mm-hmm. And I think she's a really strong character in a lot of ways. And, I think it shows that even still she can have her flaws and the work she has to do to sort of improve on things.
So how did you get the idea for the book?
Yeah, so I remember this day very clearly. I was in a library trying to find something to read, and nothing was really grabbing me. I felt like every book I picked up had the same blurb. It was always, so-and-so was perfectly normal, and then something horrific happened. Or sometimes, so-and-so seemed perfectly normal, but something horrific had happened in the past. Mm-hmm. And I said to myself very mulishly, well, if this is what I have to write to be published, I'm going to come up with the most horrific thing I can, and I'm going to write a story about it. So I did. And the events that happened with her mother, that was this event that I came up with and started to write a story about it. And it kind of unexpectedly turned into this exploration of resentment and what it means to have wasted a life, or, where to find the value in things, and all these kinds of things just came out of it. So I started off very stubbornly, and the joke's on me because I think it turned out quite well.
Oh yes, no, I don't think there's a joke there. I just think you created something out of your frustration. So I think that's great that you were looking for a book and you wrote the book that you wanted to read. Yeah, that's great. So you live in Barcelona, but you're from Nottingham, England. And how did you end up in Barcelona? And what other things do you do besides writing?
Oh, those are both great questions. So I was working in Nottingham, in my hometown, in 2016, 17, 18, and not really getting along with my boss. They say you never leave a job, you always leave a boss, right? Definitely true in this case. And I'd always had the idea of living abroad, learning a new language. And I'd always left the door open to do further study, to do a master's. Although when I graduated from my bachelor's, I was very sure it was not going to go straight into master's, needed some life experience. And Brexit was coming. So I decided if I was going to go live in Europe, it should be before Brexit. So I quit my job. I dyed my hair blue. I went backpacking in Indonesia for a couple of months and I moved to Barcelona.
Oh, wow. And was anyone with you or did you do this on your own?
Solo.
Oh, wow. And so what do you do in Barcelona besides salsa dancing? I noticed on your website.
Yeah. So I came here to study a master's in international relations, which I finished in 2020. And I now work for a think tank. We work on the implementation of EU-funded projects in the South Mediterranean, so North Africa and the Middle East, projects on international and economic development and things like that. I spend a lot of my time dancing. I do salsa dance. I also swing dance, which is great fun. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of life to enjoy in Barcelona. It is a great city. I really enjoy it. Honestly, quitting the job and moving to Barcelona was the best decision ever.
That's great. Oh, that's so great. Yes, I've moved a lot in my life, so I kind of understand that whole wanting to experience a new place. Yeah. So do you see yourself staying there for quite a long time?
Oh, I don't really do long-term plans, but I don't have any plans to leave. So yeah, for the time being, definitely staying here. I have learned Spanish. So I got my fluency qualification last year. I'm now learning Catalan. So I may as well stick around until I've got that as well. And yeah, life is great here. I have no intention of leaving.
Oh, wow. And do you have plans for another book? Or are you just waiting for inspiration for that?
I do tend to be the kind of person that kind of waits around for inspiration, but I do. So I started writing one last year, and I got sort of halfway through it, and I just felt like I wasn't finished with Abolish the Rose yet. So I left the new one, went back to Abolish the Rose, found Atmosphere Press, and went through the whole process of publication. And I've been absorbed in that until now. And only last week, I decided, right, time to get back to the new one. So I'm a good chunk of the way through it, but probably quite a lot left to go.
Yes, I kind of understand that because I wrote a book, The Space Between Time. I started it. I don't know when I started it. And I finished it in 2017 and published it independently. And then, but when I finished the rough draft in 2014, I started the second book and it's languishing. So I have quite a bit written, but I need to finish it. I need to go back and finish that. So I kind of understand
I wrote this for the first time. It must have been 2015-ish, and it's come out in 2022. So it was not a quick process.
I know. Yes. I'm not sure, but I think some people think, oh, you just sit around and write and you can come out with it in like a year. And there are authors who do that. And I do not know how they do that because
there are authors who churn out multiple books a year.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a mystery to me. I mean, I think I wrote the first draft very quickly in about 6 weeks because I don't know if it exists in the US, but in the UK, we have NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month. Yeah. And I did it as part of that and sort of had to keep going a bit. But then sort of the first draft is such a small step, I feel. And the editing and the revising, that took months. And then I sort of went through phases of fiddling with it, left it for a few months, came back to it. And that sort of takes a few years. And then I didn't do any writing at all when I was studying. And then, I don't know, it just felt like the time to go back and look at it. And I mean, I was taken on by Atmosphere Press in September last year. So at least 6 months of publishing. So yeah, it does take a while.
And then you went through another editing process, I am assuming.
Yeah, with an editor at Atmosphere, yeah. Which was tough because it feels very final. Like, these are real changes that's actually going to come out. And after a while, you feel like you've been staring at the same manuscript for so long as I don't even know if this is English anymore. But no, I do think the book definitely benefited from working on it with Megan, my editor. She gave me some great comments. She didn't do anything for me. She's very much the kind of, this is an issue, a thing, a point, and I'm going to leave you to work that out, which is exactly the way I like to work. So it was great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, that is great. And what's the name of the publisher again?
Atmosphere Press.
Atmosphere Press, because I have a friend who wrote a sequel to Pride and Prejudice that is fantastic. And he's trying to get it published. And so I will suggest that to him.
Yeah, they're based in Texas, I believe.
So Atmosphere Press, and is it like a full publishing company or is it a hybrid company?
Yeah, so they call themselves co-publishers. Cool. And I'm a little bit skeptical about this. I think it's a bit of marketing. I definitely think of it as more towards the independent publishing end of the spectrum. But they do have all of the things that at least I would expect from a publisher. So they gave me an editor, a designer, typesetter, proofreader, all of that stuff. The difference being that I paid the upfront costs. So that's, where they get the co-publishing from. Mm-hmm. I do retain 100% of the rights, which is nice. So I can still do whatever I like with it. And I was definitely always very resistant to the idea of alternative publishing models. When I was younger, I've had rejection letters piling up since the age of about 14. And I feel like there was always a certain snobbishness around, vanity publishing, as it used to be called. And then I just decided, lots of different forms of content are changing. If you look at things like Spotify is changing the music industry, YouTube is changing how people create video content and get it out to people. Business models change. And I don't think it's necessarily right that there's this big gatekeeping of traditional publishers, because it's a huge barrier to get over. Think of the number of books that get written and the number of books that get published. And it could depend on whether or not the agent you sent it to that day had an argument with her husband and is in a bad mood, She's just not. So I thought, what, I'm gonna give this a go, co-publishing, see how it goes. I wasn't expecting to make my fame or fortune, but it felt like, why not give it a go, invest in myself a bit, and so far, pretty good experience.
Oh, that's so great. And do they help you with the marketing and that kind of thing too, and the promotion?
They do. They have levels. So the standard contract includes a certain amount. And then you can pay more for more of that kind of services. So I've definitely learned a lot about this kind of process here. It is definitely possible to throw a lot of money at it, and it's definitely not the case that the more money you throw at it, the better you do. So, if I decide to go down this kind of road with the next book, I will do certain things differently. That's how you learn, isn't it? You make the mistakes, you learn from them. And I think, part of what attracted me to Atmosphere as opposed to fully independent publishing is that, this is what they do. They have the channels and the audience, and maybe that would help a bit in getting it out there. There does still fall quite a lot of burden on the author. And that's possibly my least favorite part of writing a book. I like to write stories. I don't really like to sell. But it's part of the process. So here we are giving it a go.
Yes. Oh, I've talked to so many artists and musicians and authors who say the same thing. They just want to create. They don't want to have to sell it. But in a way, if you want to sell your work before you die, you have to do that in some form or fashion. Yes. I'm learning to do that now too, to promote my podcast and my Patreon page. And, it's hard because you have to do something every day on it. It's not something that you can just let languish for a couple of months and then, I'll do some more on it and expect to get attention.
I feel like there's always this stereotype image of, you find an agent and they take you on and they do all the promotion for you and they're your biggest fan, and you go and have coffee in some trendy place in London, and you can just sit there and write all the manuscripts, and they'll be like, it's great, we're gonna sell this, and like best friend relationship, and it just doesn't happen.
No.
I mean, for most people, I would assume it probably does happen some of the time, but yeah.
And the volume of books that come out, both traditional published, independent published, and then the hybrid or whatever publishing. I mean, it's just amazing the amount of material that's out there. I could never read all the books that I have on my TBR list.
Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, I think that's really beautiful. You will never read all the books in the world. There will always be something more to read, which is great. But then I remember being frustrated of there's so many books in the world and mine isn't one of them. So I had to obviously put mine out there as well.
Right. Yes. So you said you were having trouble finding books that you wanted to read, and that's kind of what prompted the writing of this book. But what are your favorite genres? I mean, are you reading still? Do you still have that problem?
So I took a break from reading for pleasure during my bachelor's and my master's, actually, because I spent so much time reading, the stuff I have to read for the degree. And I have resisted a Kindle for a very long time, but now that I live in Spain and I would prefer to read books in English, I have given in, and I have to say it's great. I can read whatever I want, whenever I want. It's fabulous. I don't really have a specific genre that I like to read. I like to get recommendations from lots of different people, just like I like lots of different people to give me earrings, because it means I always end up with something I wouldn't have chosen myself. My mum's in a reading group, and I always read whatever she's reading at the moment. I do like a bit of fantasy. I tend not to go for like the very hardcore sci-fi end of things. I do not do horror. Books will give me nightmares. I discovered that with Roald Dahl's The Witches. I'm just very impressionable. But, yeah. At the
moment, what are you reading?
At the moment, I'm reading Breasts and Eggs, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm enjoying it. I'm still undecided. I'm about halfway through.
Do you finish a book even if you don't like it, or do you abandon books that just don't speak to you?
I find it really hard to abandon books. I read Evil in War. There's a list on Reddit of books that people think will be classics in 100 years, and I'm sort of working my way through that.
Oh.
I did not get on with Evil in War. I did not like it at all, and I couldn't not finish it. So I had to sit there and read it and be like, I don't like this book, but I'm gonna get through it. I have abandoned some. Some I just can't do. Lolita I couldn't get through because I find that too disturbing.
Yes, it's pretty disturbing. All right, yeah. I have not read the book. I've only seen the movie, but yes, that's a disturbing subject.
Yeah, so I couldn't get through that one. I've actually never finished The Catcher in the Rye, and I don't remember there being anything specifically wrong with it. I think I just got bored. I feel like I'll give it another go. They say it's a classic.
They do say it's a classic, and I've never read it. I was not required to read it in high school. And now that I'm 69, I think it's past, I would not get it. Or I'm past the angst of the book. So, yeah. Some of them I'll just never go back and read. Those supposed classics I'll probably never go back and read. Although I did go back and read To Kill a Mockingbird finally. I didn't read that in high school either. And
I did read that in high school and I loved it.
yeah, I loved it too. And I even read Go Set a Watchman, which most people just railed about. And I said, oh, well, I know what happened there. They read to the part where it said that Atticus was attending Klan meetings and threw the book across the room. They had the same reaction that Jean Louise did. But if you keep reading, you find out why he's going. It's not just because he wants to be a Klan member. It's because he wants to see the faces behind the masks. He wants to know who those people are.
I did read it. I didn't rail against it. I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was necessary, but I thought it was fine. Yeah, I don't really enjoy reading all the English classics either. The Bronte sisters. I struggle with female characters that, get so upset they are bedridden for days. This kind of hysteria of Wuthering Heights. I'm just a bit not quite inspired.
Yeah, that one's not one of my favorites either. My sister says it's a book about obsession, not a book about love. And that's true, I think. But I did like Jane Eyre. I haven't read any Anne Bronte, although I have some on my either iBooks or Kindle. So I will probably read one of those eventually. Yeah, Jane Austen's more my favorite because her women characters are more feisty. I like those. Yeah. But I'm reading Elizabeth Gaskell and Anthony Trollope. So those are some fun ones. And I've read 3 or 4 Dickens. I haven't read all of Dickens, but I do like British classics a lot. Just have to read the right ones. Some of them are pretty depressing, but yeah. So do you read in Spanish as well?
I can. It makes it more of an effort as opposed to a pleasure. I'm currently reading a book in Catalan that's nonfiction because the problem with reading fiction is people tend to be quite expressive and metaphorical, and it's what I like about writing is I can play with the language. But then as someone who's only been speaking the language for 3 years, makes it quite difficult. I have just finished a book in Spanish, self-published by a friend of mine, someone I met, and we turned out we both published books, and we were like, oh, great. So yeah, I prefer reading in English because I can lose myself in it more. When you're so absorbed in a book, you don't notice time passing. That is beautiful. That's like my favorite experience.
Yes.
Unfortunately, if I want to get there in Spanish, I'm going to have to keep reading in Spanish, but I'll, sort of alternate maybe.
Yes. Yes. If you've 3 years, that's a short amount of time to be speaking a language and be fluent in it. And plus there's still, there are like idioms in English that I go, what's that? And I've been speaking English since I was, so I'm sure that you have that in Spanish as well.
Yeah, so when I arrived here, I was very much single-mindedly, I want to learn Spanish. I avoided English people like the plague. There are quite a lot of English people here who live here and they live completely in English. Because, you can work remotely. A lot of people here speak English. It's very easy to do. I was like, no, I'm going to learn Spanish. So I did make quite a big effort. The master's I was doing was in English, but then after 9 months, I decided I'll do an exchange semester in Chile because I speak Spanish now. That was really difficult. The Chilean accent is very, very difficult. I think my first day at university there was a lecture given by a Spanish woman and a Chilean man. I understood every word that the woman said. The man could have been speaking Martian. I was like, oh, God, it's so difficult. But it's great. And I live a lot of my life in Spanish now, and I share an office with a Spanish girl, and we're always because you notice things about another language that you didn't notice about yours.
Mm-hmm.
And she's always asking me about prepositions. So she finished an email once with, I'll get back at you. And I was like, no, I'll get back to you.
Right.
Otherwise, you're taking revenge on someone. She was like, well, that makes no sense. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. See, prepositions in English, if you get them wrong, you end up saying something else. It's not just that it's wrong. It means something else.
I know.
Yeah.
I used to teach at a border town, and most of the students spoke Spanish as their first language. And so when they were writing, I would have to correct their prepositions and their, some of their idioms were also not quite right. And I would just say in English, you need to say it this way because it means this, exactly that same thing. So I understand that. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people tell me they're on the car, and I always tell them I recommend to go inside.
Yeah, right. Oh, English is hard, I think.
It's hard. Yeah.
It's hard. And I
especially,
do,
especially spelling. I don't envy anyone having to learn English spelling as a foreigner.
I know, really. Well, I always used to tell my students that because I'm really a theater, I have theater background and degrees, but I had to teach English at this school. And so I used to say, English is made up of so many different languages. That's why the spellings are so strange because, it's not like Spanish that's basically came from one source, yeah. So, and Mexican Spanish is different than Spanish. So I don't speak Spanish. I only know a little bit of it. I tried to learn, and then the lessons got so long and I have too many creative endeavors that I didn't have time to continue with it. So we are getting down to about 7 minutes. And do you have anything else you want to say now, or do you have more that you want to talk about in case we need to stop and restart again?
I mean, I could probably ramble for a long time, but I don't know if any of it's interesting or relevant. I don't know. I mean, I could tell you about the book I'm writing.
Yes,
now.
Please do.
I also just want to add, I have absolutely loved the process of becoming bilingual. And as an adult, it's like I can see my brain changing, and the way just language is different, and you sort of start thinking in concepts. Like there'll be times I'll be speaking and I will forget a word in English, and that for 26 years was the only language I spoke, and it's such a weird feeling. Love it. I want to keep learning more.
That's great. Yes, pretty soon you'll have 3 languages that you know.
Yeah, my friends are waiting for me to write the translation in Catalan. Catalan is quite difficult. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Right, yes. But tell a little bit about your second book and where we can find your current book.
So the new one is a retelling of a specific saga of Greek myths. From the point of view of the women in that family, in a world where there's no gods and no magic. Because it occurred to me that women in Greek myth tend to do things because gods make them. Someone makes Zeus angry, so, he makes his wife fall in love with a bull and they have a Minotaur.
Right.
And so the overall plot doesn't change, so it's been really fun for me to write in sort of in what situation would this woman choose to do this, or how would events have happened so that it later becomes known that this Minotaur was born, but what really happened, and how could it have happened such that it was her own agency, which has been really fun, and I'm enjoying getting back into it.
Oh, that's cool. And then now where can we find you and find your book?
As of very recently, because I wasn't on social media before I published this book, I'm on Instagram at Alanna Irving, and Twitter at Alanna_Irving. You can find my book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble online, I think in the US, Waterstones in the UK, and also on Goodreads. Ratings, reviews, obviously very welcome.
Oh, that's so great. Yes, I'll have to go. Oh, I'll have to go do the review. I think I did write a comment and I did give it stars. So I'll have to go write a review now.
That'd be great.
Yes. Oh, this is so fantastic. I love talking to people who don't live in the US. I love talking to people all over the world. So that's great. I'm so happy that you have published your book and you made friends with Terry Brown. She's fantastic. And that you're making friends with other writers. That's cool too.
Yeah, it is.
You need a support group.
Community. Yeah.
You need a support group. Thank you so much, Alanna, for being my guest. I wish you well with your book.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, good. And I wish you well with your book.
Thank you very much.
Before I go, I'd like to give a big shout out to Podmatch, which I call a dating service for podcasters. Since I joined their platform, I have met so many wonderful people from all over the world, and they make the matches so easy that if you are a podcaster or you have a message that you want to share, you might want to consider checking them out. The affiliate link is at the bottom of my show notes on my website at Sage-Woman Chronicles at sagewoman.life. Part of what I love about them is that they promote civil conversations, and can't we use that right now? So if you check them out, tell them Lucinda sent you. I'd also like to invite you to my Patreon community, where we will have chats with authors or creators. We'll have member chats about the stories that they love, and occasionally we'll have extra episodes or uncut episodes of Story Power. So please go check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/storypower without the hyphen, all one word. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. You'll find the show notes for this episode at my website, Sage-Woman Chronicles at sagewoman.life. You can leave a comment there. And remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.